The morning sun peeked through the tall windows of Angelina Jolie's quiet home in Los Feliz. The air was calm, and the sound of birds outside blended with the soft ticking of an old clock on the wall. Angelina sat at a wooden desk in her study, a cup of black coffee warming her hands. The room was filled with books, papers, and art supplies. It was her thinking space, where she often came to reflect. Her eyes wandered to a stack of letters and notebooks. Her life had been filled with busy days, press events, and flights across the world. But today, everything felt still. She looked down at a blank sheet of paper and paused. Her mind wasn't on her latest film or her travel plans. Instead, she kept thinking about someone she hadn't seen in a long time. Johnny Depp. They weren't close. They'd met a few times at award shows and charity events, always polite, always brief. But Angelina had been watching his recent interviews, reading between the lines. There was something about him that seemed familiar. Not the image the world saw, but something quieter. A kind of loneliness she recognized in herself. She remembered the way people had judged her in the past, made up stories, painted her in black and white. Johnny had gone through something similar. Even though they had different lives, it seemed they had both walked through storms that left them misunderstood. Angelina picked up a pen and began to write. Her handwriting flowed slowly at first, but then with more confidence. She didn't write to comfort him. She didn't write for attention. She simply wanted to reach out, to say, "I see you." She wrote about her new project, something focused on using art and storytelling to heal. She thought maybe, just maybe, he would understand. She signed the letter simply, folded it neatly, and placed it in a cream-colored envelope. There was no plan, no expectation, just a message from one person to another, far from the cameras, far from the noise. Later that day, her assistant quietly handed the letter off to a trusted contact. No one else knew about it. No reporters, no managers, just a simple letter carried from one artist to another. As the sun moved across the sky and the shadows shifted in her study, Angelina leaned back in her chair. She didn't know if Johnny would ever write back. She wasn't sure if he would even read it, but somehow writing the letter felt like the right thing to do. Outside, the city kept moving, but inside that room, a small moment had taken shape. Quiet, honest, and real. For days, Angelina went about her usual routine. She worked on her charity projects, spoke with colleagues, and attended meetings. But something kept tugging at her mind. The letter she had sent to Johnny Depp had not left her thoughts. She wondered if he had received it, if he had read it, or if it was just lost in the shuffle of his busy life. Yet, as the days passed, the idea behind her letter began to grow. Angelina wasn't just thinking about Johnny anymore. She started thinking about how she could bring more artists together, how they could use their talents not for fame or fortune, but for something deeper, something that could touch people, inspire them, and bring change. She had always believed in the power of storytelling, in the way that words, art, and music could help people heal. The world was full of pain, confusion, and suffering, and she knew that sometimes the only way to make sense of it was to create. She thought about her own experiences, how art had been a way for her to process her emotions, to find peace during difficult times. Maybe, just maybe, Johnny would understand this too. As the weeks passed, Angelina's project began to take shape. It wasn't just about helping others through traditional charity work. It was about creating a space where artists from all walks of life could come together and use their skills to tell stories that mattered. The project would be a mixture of art, film, music, and even written stories. She wanted it to be a place where people could express their struggles, their triumphs, their pain, and their hope. She spoke to a few close friends about the idea, and they all encouraged her. "It's bold," one of them said, "but you've always done things that matter." Another added, "People need something real right now, Angelina. You have the power to make it happen." Despite their support, Angelina still couldn't shake the feeling that something was missing. She had the vision, but she didn't have the one person she thought could bring it to life in a way only he could. She knew Johnny wasn't someone who enjoyed the spotlight. He wasn't interested in flashy headlines or crowds. But maybe, through this project, they could do something that really meant something. Together. She wasn't sure how to reach out again. She didn't want to push or seem too eager, so she decided to wait. She told herself that if Johnny was meant to be a part of this, he would find his way to her in his own time. In the meantime, Angelina kept working. The idea continued to grow, gaining shape and structure. Each day brought new plans, new ideas, and new people to help bring it all to life. But in the back of her mind, the thought of Johnny never fully faded. The letter had been the beginning. Now, she hoped there was more to come. A week had passed since Angelina sent her letter to Johnny. She had almost forgotten about it amidst the busy days of meetings and phone calls. But every so often, her mind would wander back to that moment when she sat at her desk, writing with the hope that Johnny might understand what she was trying to say. She hadn't expected an immediate response. After all, Johnny Depp was known for his quiet and private life. It wasn't like him to publicly share his thoughts or opinions, but a small part of Angelina had still hoped for something. A message, a call, or even just a simple reply. It was late afternoon when her assistant, Julia, came into her office, holding a small package in her hands. The package was simple, wrapped in plain brown paper. Julia set it on the desk, her face betraying the smallest hint of excitement. "It's for you," she said, before leaving the room to let Angelina open it in peace. Angelina's heart raced slightly. She wondered if this was it. Could it be from Johnny? She carefully unwrapped the paper, revealing a small sketchbook. The edges were worn, as if it had been used for a long time. On the cover, there was no name or marking, just the simple, familiar shape of a tree drawn with quick, flowing strokes. Angelina's fingers hovered over the book, feeling the weight of the moment. Then, with a deep breath, she opened the sketchbook. On the first page, there was a drawing, a tree with its roots exposed. The roots tangled deep into the ground, like a web that reached far beneath the surface. Above the roots, the tree's branches stretched wide, its leaves swaying gently in a breeze. But it wasn't the tree that caught Angelina's attention. It was the words written beneath the drawing, in Johnny's familiar handwriting. "The world only sees the leaves." The note read, "I saw your roots. Let's build something real." Angelina smiled softly. The words were simple, but they carried weight. It wasn't just a response. It was a connection. Johnny understood. He saw beyond the surface, beyond the headlines, and into the heart of what she was trying to do. He had taken the time to send this message, and it felt like an invitation. There was something powerful in his words, something that felt like an understanding of the very essence of the project Angelina was creating. She had hoped for a reply, but she hadn't expected it to be so personal, so thoughtful. As she sat in her office, holding the sketchbook in her hands, a sense of calm washed over her. It was as if the universe had confirmed that she was on the right path. This project, this idea of bringing artists together, could be more than just a dream. With Johnny's response, it could be the beginning of something meaningful. Angelina closed the sketchbook, her thoughts racing with possibilities. She didn't know what the next steps would be, but she knew one thing for sure: she wasn't alone in this journey. Johnny had joined her, in his own quiet way, and together they could create something real. The days after receiving Johnny's letter passed slowly. Angelina found herself thinking about it more than she had expected. His drawing, the message, the quiet yet powerful way he had reached out, it all stayed with her. It wasn't just the words that had impacted her, but the feeling that they were no longer alone in their individual struggles, trying to find meaning and healing in the chaos around them. Johnny, in his way, had understood exactly what she was trying to do. Despite the comfort his response had given her, Angelina knew there was still much work ahead. She had always been someone who focused on the task at hand, and now that her project had gained a new layer of significance with Johnny's involvement, she dove into planning. The idea of artists coming together to create something meaningful felt more real than ever. It wasn't just a dream anymore, it was a path forward. Yet there was still the question of what would happen next. Johnny hadn't exactly promised anything. His note was a simple invitation. But what did it mean in the bigger picture? Would he agree to work with her in person? Would he show up to the meetings and bring his unique perspective into the project? Or had he simply sent the sketch as a kind gesture, without any intention of following through? Angelina couldn't be sure. She wasn't the type of person to chase after answers, especially when it came to someone like Johnny Depp. He valued his privacy, and she respected that. Still, she couldn't help but wonder if he would contact her again. She found herself checking her phone more often than usual, half expecting a message, but the days went by with no word. As the days turned into weeks, the waiting began to feel a little heavier. Angelina told herself that patience was a virtue, that sometimes things took time to unfold. After all, this was not the kind of project that could be rushed. It was about creating something that would last, something that would stand the test of time. And perhaps, just perhaps, Johnny needed time to think about how he wanted to be involved. In the meantime, she kept busy. She met with other artists, gathered ideas, and worked on the logistics of the project. Slowly but surely, the foundation was being laid. But still, in the back of her mind, there was that lingering question. Would Johnny show up when it mattered most? Would he be there when they needed him to take the next step? Sometimes, when she found a quiet moment, she would look out the window and let her thoughts wander. She thought about the world, the art that had helped her through difficult times, and how it had the power to help others as well. The project was about much more than just creating art. It was about creating a space for healing, for understanding, and for connection. And Johnny, with his unique perspective, could be the one to help make that happen. Angelina knew that the journey wasn't over. She just had to wait a little longer to see where it would lead. 2 weeks had passed since Angelina received Johnny's letter. In that time, her thoughts had continued to bounce back to his simple sketch and his words beneath it. The world only sees the leaves. I saw your roots. Let's build something real. Those words had stuck with her, offering a quiet strength, but still, she wasn't sure what would come next. She had sent him an idea, an invitation, and now she was left wondering if he would take the next step or if that would be the end of it. She kept herself busy, focusing on the growth of her project. Her phone rang often with updates, and she met with various artists who were eager to join the cause. Everything was moving forward, and the idea of creating a safe, creative space for people to express their stories was becoming more real with every passing day. But even with everything else happening, there was a part of Angelina that couldn't stop checking her inbox, hoping for something from Johnny. She didn't want to rush him, but the weight was starting to feel a little heavier. Then, one afternoon, as the sun was starting to dip low in the sky, her phone buzzed with a new message. It wasn't from a colleague. It wasn't an update. It was a short, simple note, just a few words, but they carried a weight all of their own. Let's meet. I have some ideas. The message was from Johnny. Angelina read it several times, trying to process the simplicity of it. There was no explanation, no long conversation, just a clear invitation to move forward. It was everything she needed to hear. Johnny had made up his mind, and now it was time to take action. She quickly replied, arranging a time and place to meet. There was no grand gesture, no formal arrangement, just a quiet meeting to talk about the project and how they could make it come to life. The anticipation bubbled inside her, but she kept her calm. This was just the beginning of something bigger. Johnny's involvement meant that this project could carry more weight, more depth. A few days later, they met at a small cafe in Provence, far from the noise of Hollywood. Angelina arrived early, taking a seat by the window where she could see the soft glow of the sun setting over the hills. She felt a sense of peace in this place, a feeling that the world outside had slowed down just for a moment. When Johnny arrived, it was as she expected, quiet, humble, and almost unnoticed. He didn't walk in like a star, didn't draw attention to himself. He simply sat down across from Angelina, a cup of tea in hand. There were no cameras, no reporters, just two people sitting together, ready to talk. They didn't dive straight into business. Instead, they spoke casually about life, about the challenges they had faced, and about the work they were both doing to try to make a difference. The conversation felt natural, like old friends catching up, and soon they were talking about the project, how they could bring artists together, how they could use their platform to create something meaningful. There was an energy between them now, something that was different from the world of fame and headlines. It was about the work, the art, and the people they could help. Johnny's ideas were thoughtful, grounded, and creative. He spoke with passion, and Angelina listened, nodding along, feeling the vision of their project growing with each passing minute. After that day, there was no turning back. The path was clear. Together, they would build something real. Days passed after the meeting in Provence, and the quiet excitement that had settled inside Angelina began to grow. The conversation with Johnny had been everything she hoped for and more. They had talked about the vision of the project, shared ideas, and discussed how they could bring people together through their art. Both of them, despite their different worlds, understood the power of creation, the way it could heal, inspire, and connect. But after that meeting, things slowed down again. Angelina threw herself back into the day-to-day work. She spoke to potential artists, organized events, and continued to push forward with the project. Yet, there was a part of her that couldn't shake the feeling that she was still waiting for something. They had shared ideas, but the next step was unclear. Would Johnny actually take part in the project? Would he contribute his art, his voice, his time? Angelina didn't push. She respected his space and knew that he, like her, needed time to think things through. Yet there was always the lingering question in the back of her mind: what now? Then, one evening, just as the day was fading into night, Angelina's phone rang. She wasn't expecting a call, especially not from Johnny. He hadn't mentioned when he'd reach out next. Still, she answered quickly, curious. "Hello," she said, her voice calm but curious. On the other end, there was a slight pause before she heard a familiar voice. "Angelina?" It was Johnny. His voice was soft, a little raspy, as if he had been thinking for a while. "I've been thinking about our conversation," he said. "I want to be part of this." Angelina felt a rush of relief, but she kept her voice steady. "That's wonderful to hear," she said. "I'm glad you want to be involved." "I've been working on some ideas," Johnny continued. "I have some artwork I want to contribute, but I also think we could take it further than just art. There's something about the project that feels important, more than just a creative endeavor. It feels like it could change things." Angelina listened intently, grateful for his words, for the way he was seeing the bigger picture. She had always known that this project could be a catalyst for change, but hearing Johnny speak about it with such sincerity gave it even more weight. "I agree," she replied. "This is about more than just art. It's about creating a space where people can find healing, express themselves, and feel understood. I'm so glad you're on board." Johnny chuckled softly. "I think we can make it work. Let's meet soon, talk more about how we can get started." They made plans to meet the following week, to begin the next phase of the project. The call ended, but Angelina sat for a moment, holding the phone in her hands. There was something quiet and powerful in that conversation, a shared understanding that this was just the beginning. The idea of bringing artists together, using creativity as a force for good, was beginning to take shape. Johnny's commitment, his belief in the project, gave it the kind of authenticity it needed. Now, they could truly build something meaningful. The meeting with Johnny was set for the following week, and Angelina was eager. There had been so much anticipation leading up to it, but now it was finally time to dig deeper into their shared vision. The project they were working on was no longer just an idea, it was turning into something real. Johnny's involvement gave it an air of legitimacy, and Angelina felt a quiet excitement bubbling inside her as the days passed. When they finally met again, it was in a small studio in Los Angeles, a place away from the bright lights and busy streets. The studio was peaceful, filled with natural light streaming through large windows. It was a place where people could work and think without distractions. Angelina arrived early, as usual, and began to organize some notes and ideas she had written down. She wanted to be prepared, but she also knew that the most important part of their meeting would be the exchange of thoughts, the brainstorming of ideas. Soon after, Johnny arrived. He greeted her with his usual calm, his eyes thoughtful, as if he were already deep in thought about the project. They exchanged a few pleasantries, but there was no need for small talk. Both of them knew exactly why they were here. They were here to create something meaningful. "I've been working on some ideas for the art portion," Johnny said as he sat down across from her, laying out a few sketches on the table. His drawings were raw, full of emotion and energy, and they conveyed a sense of urgency that matched the project's purpose. Angelina leaned in to study the sketches. Each one seemed to tell a different story, a different facet of the human experience. There were faces, landscapes, and abstract shapes, all representing the struggles and triumphs of the people who would be part of their creative community. Johnny's work spoke volumes without saying a word. It was clear that his art was not just for show. It was an expression of something deeper, something he wanted to share with the world. "These are incredible," Angelina said softly, her voice filled with admiration. "I can already see how they could be part of the larger vision. The project isn't just about showing art. It's about giving people a voice, helping them tell their own stories." Johnny nodded, his expression serious. "Exactly. I think the art should reflect the diversity of experiences. There's so much pain in the world, but there's also beauty, and that beauty needs to be seen, understood, and shared." They spent hours in the studio, discussing how they could bring their ideas to life. They talked about the various artists they could invite to join the project, the spaces they would need to create, and how they could make the experience accessible to people from all walks of life. The possibilities seemed endless, and yet it felt clear that they were on the right path. As the meeting came to an end, both Angelina and Johnny felt a sense of satisfaction. They had laid the foundation for something truly special, something that had the potential to reach people on a level far beyond art alone. They were building a bridge that would connect individuals, communities, and cultures through the universal language of creativity. "We've got a lot of work ahead of us," Angelina said with a smile, "but I think we're ready." "We're just getting started," Johnny replied, his eyes shining with quiet determination. The days and weeks that followed were filled with hard work, meetings, and endless planning. Angelina and Johnny, along with a small but dedicated team of artists, organizers, and volunteers, were focused on bringing their shared vision to life. The project, now officially named Roots of Creation, was about to take its first steps into the world, and the anticipation was growing. Angelina felt both excited and nervous. This was the moment when everything they had discussed, every idea they had bounced around, would come to life. But it was also the moment when their project would be tested. Would people understand the message? Would they be moved by the art and stories? Would it truly make a difference? The first event was scheduled to take place in a small gallery space in Los Angeles. It was modest, but it was a place where the work could be seen, discussed, and appreciated. The walls of the gallery were filled with artwork from artists who had joined the project, and each piece spoke to a different part of the human experience. There were abstract paintings that captured the chaos of the world, photographs that told stories of resilience and hope, and sculptures that represented the strength of the human spirit. As the evening of the launch arrived, Angelina stood in the back of the gallery, watching the crowd. There were people from all walks of life, some familiar faces from the world of art and film, but also everyday people who had been touched by the project. The room was buzzing with conversation, with people discussing the pieces, sharing their thoughts, and connecting over shared experiences. For Angelina, it was a moment of validation. The project was no longer just an idea, it was real, and it was making an impact. Johnny, who had been quietly observing from the sidelines, finally stepped forward. He wasn't one to seek the spotlight, but tonight was different. He had created some of the artwork on display, and he knew that his involvement could help draw attention to the cause. When he spoke, his voice was calm and steady, just like his presence. He thanked the artists for their contributions, and he spoke briefly about the importance of creativity in times of hardship. "This project isn't just about art," Johnny said, looking out over the crowd. "It's about people. It's about giving a voice to those who feel unheard, and helping others see the world in a different way. Art has the power to heal, to connect, and to change the way we look at life. I'm proud to be a part of this." The crowd listened quietly, absorbing his words. There was something powerful in his simple, sincere message. It wasn't about celebrity or fame. It was about the work, about the mission. The people in the room understood that this project was not just a collection of art, but a movement that could bring people together, foster understanding, and inspire change. As the evening drew to a close, Angelina felt a deep sense of gratitude. Everything they had worked for was starting to come to fruition. But this was just the beginning. There was much more to be done, many more people to reach, and countless more stories to share. The road ahead would be long, but Angelina and Johnny knew that together, they had the power to create something truly meaningful.